Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Sridhamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschatya Deshtakarine. Welcome back, Prabhus, to Srila Prabhupada, our Founder-Acarya, Lesson 9, Fictional Prabhupada. Anything to say, Ramananda Prabhu?
No, we're not on our end.
Okay. You're going to mute?
Oh, I'm sorry, but I need to mute everybody. Oops. Spaced out. Sorry. Now we're ready on our end.
Okay. Lesson 9, Fictional Prabhupadas. Studying our Founder-Acharya's teachings without studying his life and how he lived and applied those teachings is impersonal, and becoming attached to our Founder-Acharya's personality without studying and following his teachings is sentimental. Before we continue to explore how to deepen our love for Srila Prabhupada, let's identify and dispel some lingering, impersonal, and sentimental misconceptions we may have about him. So this is the Prayojana section of the seminar, Deepening Our Love for Srila Prabhupada. Excuse me, and before we do the last lesson, Your Srila Prabhupada, we have to make sure that we're cleared of sentimental and impersonal misconceptions that we may be harboring, consciously or unconsciously, about Prabhupada. So this lesson is by no means exhaustive, this list of sentimental and impersonal fictions, but it's a good start. Again, my godbrother Haripad Prabhu is responsible for these very nice line drawings, two of which you see here. Some of these drawings do lend themselves to kind of shadowy looking Prabhupada. You wonder if that's really Prabhupada. No reflection on his wonderful work, Haripad Prabhu's wonderful work, but I did appropriate some of them for the lesson. So here in the title slide, some Prabhupada drawings face off, if you will, as fictional Prabhupada. Are you the real Prabhupada? Are you the real Prabhupada? Well, let's see. Now, by fictional, I mean either illusory, false, or imbalanced. Although we may never know Srila Prabhupada completely, after all, it says in the Shastra, Vaishnava-Kriya Mudra, we can never really understand completely the mind of the Vaishnava. Our understanding can be so incomplete as to be imbalanced. So this is where it gets tricky when we come to the imbalanced conceptions of Prabhupada. As we say in English, a little learning or a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Okay. All right, impersonal fictions. There's a image of Prabhupada, or is it Prabhupada? That's one of those shadowy images. Surveying the impersonal fictions list. So here's the list. Again, by no means exhaustive, but definitely some highlight impersonal fictions. The first one is very obvious. Prabhupada is God. And even though it's obvious, put nothing past Maya. She's a pure devotee of the Lord. She's expert. And she can make you believe up is down and right is wrong if you want to. So Prabhupada is God actually happened in ISKCON's history. The next one. ISKCON is Prabhupada. You know, we just have a one-on-one equation there. So that's a dangerously imbalanced or dangerously incomplete, we could say. Another one, similar. The GBC is Prabhupada. Of course, in one sense, yes. But in all senses, Okay. Prabhupada is the guru only of his Diksha is initiated. disciples. Horribly incomplete and impersonal. Let's take a look now at each one of them a little more closely. Okay, there's a real photo of Prabhupada. Again, in Bhaktivedanta Manor, 1973. And in this shot, our godbrother Bhargava Prabhu captured Prabhupada looking rather sternly, or even askance, to his left, to our right. So you may recall from Lesson 1 how Srila Prabhupada introduced the oneness and difference of God and Guru during the first Janmashtami day in September 1966 at 26 2nd Avenue. Very dramatic lesson how Prabhupada dropped that bomb by saying that tomorrow we'll have initiation. Initiation means the Guru agrees to take charge of the disciple, and the disciple agrees to accept the spiritual master as God. And without rehashing the whole drama, the punchline was, when they did finally seek clarification, Prabhupada said, God in the sense that he's God's representative, he's like his ambassador. But God is God, and the spiritual master is his representative. There's a oneness and there's a difference. So Prabhupada made that very clear, actually, on that dramatic teaching opportunity in September 66. Yet only 4 years later, just before the same time of year, it was Janmashtami Vyasa Puja season, 4 freshly minted sannyasis, Prabhupada had just created 4 new sannyasis, sannyasi disciples of Srila Prabhupada, were preaching that Prabhupada was God. Without going into the whole history of why they were preaching that, it's fascinating. You can see it on the following Srila Prabhupada DVD series by Yadav Prabhu. It's on the very first DVD. In fact, if I remember correctly, I give the first testimonial about the event as the visual pans over the original New Vrindavan farmhouse temple. I come on identifying, setting the theme. Okay, so they were preaching Prabhupada was God. It was very devastating. Half the devotees were believing it. Half the devotees were saying, this is crazy. Prabhupada said, if you say you're God, you're dog. So the first official act of the GBC was to send a telegram. They were all in New Vrindavan, all of them except one. And they sent a telegram to Srila Prabhupada, who was observing Janmashtami and Vyasa Puja in Tokyo. He was opening up Tokyo, Japan. And they said in the telegram, this is what they're saying, what do you say? And so Prabhupada very swiftly and decisively sent a telegram back saying, expel them. Expel them. And here's what else he said. Okay. Fact. Okay, the fiction is Prabhupada is God. Fact is, quote, there is only one thing worse than underestimating the Guru, overestimating the Guru. They have said, I am God. Therefore, if I am God, they also can become God. This is impersonalism. Okay, so don't put anything past Maya. It seems so wild and wacky, but it happened. And I feel blessed to have been there and experienced how Prabhupada saw a full-blown Mayavad weed right in the heart of this movement, and how swiftly he acted to uproot the weed and expel it, throw it away. Later on, Prabhupada told those sannyasis, you can come back to ISKCON if you preach the right message, if you open up temples, make devotees, and they were sincere. They did. And they were accepted back. Okay. That's an obvious fiction, obvious to us now, not so obvious to those of us attending that festival in August 1970. I was about a month-old bhakta at the time. In the next slide, we will examine a subtler fictional Prabhupada. It's a little more subtle. Okay, fiction. ISKCON is Prabhupada. Well, of course, in one sense. ISKCON is nothing but Prabhupada's energy. It's the organization he created to spread Lord Chaitanya's movement all over the world. And here's what Prabhupada said in a letter to Brahmananda about his relationship to ISKCON and his disciples. Right? So the fact is, you are all my limbs of my body. Unless you cooperate, my life will be useless. The senses and life are co-relative. That means you can't have one without the other. Without life, the senses cannot act. And without sense, life is inactive. There's a more famous quote that's circulated around ISKCON forever, and that quote is, ISKCON is my body, but that must have been uttered when the record button was not on, because we don't actually have an ear witness or a written attestation of that. We don't have it on tape, we don't have it on tape. So this we do have in a letter, and this says the same thing. You are all my limbs of my body. And Prabhupada also said things like the BBT is my heart. So, so notice that since Srila Prabhupada has called us the limbs of his body, his unique spirit is our life and soul. And further, while ISKCON is certainly Srila Prabhupada's energy, as its creator, Srila Prabhupada retains his own identity. This is how Prabhupada once explained this principle to some students who were not even his disciples. He was in he was in London. And no, it was in the Manor, correct. It's 11th of July, 1973. And he was talking about many things. And at one point he said this, quote, suppose if I say, I am everything in this, my institution. Does it mean that I have lost my personality? No, no. If somebody says that Bhaktivedanta Swami is everything, does it mean I have lost my personality? That is material understanding. Even materially, Prabhupada would give the example of an industrialist whose energy is everywhere present in his enterprise, although he may not personally be there, but everything is the stamp, shows the stamp of the founder of the institution. Okay, so here's a question. When Prabhupada's ISKCON body falls ill, in part or as a whole, how do we restore its health? And the obvious answer, by restoring our society to its soul, its Founder-Acarya, Srila Prabhupada, who is eternally present in his curative Vani, his life, his teachings, his mood, and his mission. See why it's dangerous just to say kind of glibly, ISKCON is Prabhupada? Then you can very easily fall into the trap of thinking that anything that happens in ISKCON must be okay, must be authentic, must be what Prabhupada wants. When in fact, we always have to check what's going on in our society against Prabhupada's everlasting, ever manifest, ever present Vani, his life, his teaching, his mood, and his mission. Okay, so that's a fiction because it's incomplete. And there's another fiction. And so in this slide, we'll look at an illusory Prabhupada. Now let's see if that's correct. Anyway, well, this is a very similar fiction. Fiction. The GBC is Prabhupada. Okay, that's the fiction. Again, it sounds good because, well, it sounds good because of the fact. Here's the fact. Fact. Quote, the Governing Body Commission, GBC, will be the ultimate managing authority for the entire international society for Krishna consciousness. And that was right in Prabhupada's last will and testament, dated the 4th June, 1977. So, to understand the oneness and also the difference of Srila Prabhupada and his governing body, let's listen to this reference from an official GBC position paper which defined ultimate managing authority in 2012, and then it was accepted as official in 2013 at the annual general meeting. This is the GBC itself explaining what ultimate managing authority means. Quote, when we use the word authority in the context of the managerial structure, we do not mean an absolute, infallible authority, such as the authority of Scripture, but the mandate, the order, right? The mandate to organize the preaching movement so that it is aligned with the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so the GBC itself, by its own acknowledgement, and of course, even a cursory study of this kind of history will bear out with abundance. The GBC is, they're all too human, like all of us, although they've been assigned that task to be the ultimate managing authority. Although our absolute and infallible Founder-Acarya did not have faith in any one GBC member, following the vision of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada did have faith in the GBC body. This was the vision of Bhaktivinoda and accepted by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Prabhupada did have faith in the concept of the GBC body, provided the members acted cooperatively to carry out his instructions. Now, here's how Srila Prabhupada expressed this to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, as recorded in TKG's diary in 1977. This is the June 27th entry. This is a very telling moment. Quote, in the middle of the night, Srila Prabhupada called for me. He could not sleep. Thinking of the will had kept him up. Quote, amongst the GBC, have you selected one after me who will succeed? Notice how Prabhupada is setting up TKG. He's testing him to see what he's going to respond. Prabhupada said, have you selected one who will succeed? And then the diary continues, I replied that we felt that we should manage together as a group, that none of us was more qualified than the others. Yes, Prabhupada replied, each of you can be Acharya of your zone. So there it is, Prabhu. Prabhupada himself was the creator. He didn't give us the zonal Acharya era and all of the trauma that entailed, but he did give us the zonal Acharya system. So with this historical perspective, we can see that although it was Srila Prabhupada himself who gave us the, quote, zonal Acharya system, it was the GBC body who gave us the, quote, zonal Acharya era, the dark night of ISKCON's soul, when competing zonal Acharyas were threatening the overall integrity of the entire Hare Krishna movement. Only when the GBC body again surrendered to our Founder-Acharya's mandate to cooperate and work together instead of competing and fighting, did ISKCON begin the long recovery process that continues to this very day. So what's the lesson? Because the fiction here, it says GBC is Prabhupada. Lesson. While the GBC, like ISKCON, is a manifestation of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual energy, the more we all absorb ourselves in our Founder-Acharya's supreme Vani, that's what's still in charge, Prabhupada's ever-manifest Vani, his life, his teachings, his mood, his mission, the more we all immerse ourselves in Prabhupada's Vani, the more transparent and accountable we will all be to his infallible authority and to one another. Now, the next fiction we're going to show on the screen is a hangover, if you will, from that zonal Acharya era. There we go. Fiction. Prabhupada is the guru only of his initiated disciples. And there is Srila Prabhupada dancing in ecstasy, famously photographed by Vishaka Devidasi at the San Francisco Rathayatra in 1974. So this is very incomplete. Note the year of. Let's see here. I'm going to have to scroll now. All right. Now here's the fact. Okay. The fiction was that Prabhupada is only the spiritual master of his initiated disciples. The fact is, quote, Srila Prabhupada is the foundational Shiksha Guru for all ISKCON devotees because he has realized and presented the teachings of the previous acharyas of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya appropriately for the modern age. Okay, that was a GBC resolution. Actually, it was the first Founder-Acarya resolution. Passed 20 years ago now. Yeah, 20 years ago, 1994, in Sridham, Mayapur. So notice the year, 1994, and ratified in Mayapur that year in March. Now, 5 months later in Mayapur, on Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja morning, when a senior devotee confronted a local brahmachari for not observing the Vyasa Puja fast by eating pizza. This happened right in the courtyard there, outside the Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, between the Maha counter, where pizza and cakes are sold, and the Garuda Stamba. It's like a whole big area. So a godbrother was chanting japa that morning, and he noticed a local brahmachari just chomping down on a big piece of pizza. So he confronted him, as tactfully as he could. He said, "Oh, Prabhu, maybe you didn't know. Today is Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja day. We're fasting." So the reply to that was, quote, "You say that because Srila Prabhupada is your guru. He's not my guru." So quite obviously, no one had informed that brahmachari about the Founder-Acharya statement passed just a few months earlier, very near to the very spot where he was eating. Yeah. Okay. Now here, I'm going to read you a more recent Founder-Acharya statement. There's been several of these over the years issued by the GBC. That was the first one. And here's another one, issued just last year. Quote, Srila Prabhupada, as the Founder-Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is the preeminent Shiksha Guru for all members of ISKCON. All members of ISKCON, for all generations, are encouraged to seek shelter of Srila Prabhupada. All members of ISKCON are entitled and encouraged to have a personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada through his books, teachings, service, and his ISKCON society. So then I say to the audience when I'm presenting live, I say, so that all ISKCON members deeply understand Srila Prabhupada's position and our relationship with him, we really don't need more legislation. We need more education. As the following slide reminds us from the Founder-Acharya lesson. So now I'm going to put on the screen a slide that occurred way back in lesson 2 when we looked at the history of the evolution of the Founder-Acharya concept. We're going to look again at Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who gave the ultimate evidence of the Founder-Acharya's position for us in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And here it is. Okay, revisiting Srila Bhaktivinoda Harinama Chintamani Founder-Acarya verse. And there's the quote. Quote, the Adyacharya, you mean, the Founder-Acarya, or original guru of a disciplic line, is appropriately worshipped and respected as the Guru Shiromani, the topmost crown jewel of the spiritual masters. His perfect philosophical conclusions are to be followed by all in his disciplic line. Any contrary instructions will not be accepted. Okay, so those were some highlights. Impersonal conceptions, either illusory or incomplete. In a word, just fictional. Now we're going to look at some sentimental fictions. And there's another one of Hari Prabhu's line drawings. This time Prabhupada looking rather bemused at some sentimental fictions, which we will now list. Illusory Prabhupada, figurehead Prabhupada, gone forever Prabhupada, Diksha Guru forever Prabhupada. What all sentimental fictions have in common is excessive attachment to the temporary. That is to say, the bodily concept of life. Okay. Let's look at illusory Prabhupada. There's Srila Prabhupada. Looks like a room conversation, enjoying a relaxed, light moment. So, illusory Prabhupada, I took that from Borijan Prabhu, who wrote in his book, My Glorious Master, his times with Srila Prabhupada and the lessons he learned. So in that book, Borijan describes how isolated in Hong Kong in the early 1970s, he and his wife gradually started neglecting Srila Prabhupada's instructions, all the while rationalizing that they were still following Srila Prabhupada. But when Srila Prabhupada did visit them in person, they received a rude awakening. The situation was they were in Hong Kong, and not only did they have no association, they had some association that really wasn't healthy. It was ISKCON devotees, but they were really just critical of ISKCON and Prabhupada's own policies. So they had kind of negative association. So in that kind of negative space, they began one by one, that's how Maya works, neglecting Prabhupada's instructions and just rationalizing. So then they got a telegram one fine day from Satsrup Maharaj, who was traveling with Prabhupada. This was 1974, as his personal secretary. And Satsrup Maharaj said, get ready, we're going to come in a couple of weeks, Prabhupada and I. So 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks, turned into 4 weeks, but Prabhupada did come. And Borijan says that, well, let's just scroll it in here, what he said. I had been imagining a Prabhupada that allowed a compromise of purity and Krishna-conscious practices. When I was suddenly confronted by the real Prabhupada, the illusory Prabhupada dissolved like mist after sunrise. Prabhupada, as he himself said, was 90% liberal, but that other 10% was strict. Borijan writes in his book how he and his wife, Jagatarini, they went to pick Prabhupada up at the airport, and just as soon as they saw Prabhupada, it took their breath away, because just by seeing him, even before he spoke with them, they immediately realized that they had been following an illusory Prabhupada because they had become illusory disciples. So the obvious question is, how can we all avoid having an illusory Prabhupada? And the obvious answer, by always living within the love and the light of Prabhupada's instructions. We have to always be in touch with Srila Prabhupada. His spoken word, his written word, applying it in our life, as much as possible, associating with devotees. Otherwise, as Prabhupada writes elsewhere, our devotional service doesn't really become distinct from material activities. We really never outgrow our material desires. We just, while we're doing service, we're also perpetually circling our attachments. Okay, illusory Prabhupada. That's a sentimental fiction. Let's go to another one. Well, there she is, the Queen, Queen Elizabeth. Now, she's been queen since 1952, when I was 6 years old. Practically all of my life, I just known that Queen Elizabeth is the Queen. And even though we ran away from England in 1776 officially, because it's Krishna's natural system, that there are, saintly kings, we can't help ourselves. We also have a soft spot for royalty like that, even as we make fun of it. So in 2012, Queen Elizabeth, she did an extensive tour of the UK because it was her Diamond Jubilee, 60th anniversary of being the Queen, 1952 to 2012. And wherever she went, she was mobbed, throngs of people praising the Queen. And she even came to one of our schools, the Krishna Avanti school in a little town called Harrow, which is really not far from Bhaktivedanta Menon. And the Queen got the mercy. She had darshan of the Gaudikaya deities there. She saw a play put on by the school children. She took some Mahaprasad, and she thought it was just lovely. She and Prince Philip. So, now, why did I put her there next to an image of Srila Prabhupada? Because as much as the Brits revere Queen Elizabeth, she's a figurehead. The Prime Minister today is David Cameron. So what's a figurehead? A figurehead is someone who may be the head of a group, a company, or even a nation in title, but actually has no real authority or responsibility. And this is the example. Most modern kings and queens today are figureheads. Now, let's scroll in. So the Guru, especially the Jagat Guru, remember in lesson 1 how we talked about how the Gurus differ by the role they play, the qualifications they have, the commitment they make to us. So the Guru, especially the Jagat Guru, the Guru of Gurus, is not like a family priest for performing ritual ceremonies, nor is he a figurehead appointed by the institution, without real presence in the hearts and minds of his followers. Rather, he is the core of his followers' very being. He is my Lord, birth after birth. Sound familiar? Well, way back in 1974, when the devotees brought Sri Guru Vandana, that prayer, Sri Guru Charana Padma, back from Mayapur, and they brought it all around the world. I remember I was actually right here where I'm sitting now. I was in Gainesville, Florida, in a different building, but it was the same place. And Amarendra, our temple president, told us that this was a song that His Divine Grace would now like us to sing to him after greeting the deities, and it's called Guru Puja. And of course, that's since become a long-standing institution. Yet we're singing that song in Bengali, because it was written by Srila Narottam Das Thakur, and for most of us, Bengali is not our mother tongue. So if that's the case, as it is for most devotees in the world, do we know what the lines mean? Chakudana diloye, right? He opens my darkened eyes. Prabhupada freely translated it. Chakudana diloye. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. And then, Janme Janme, Prabhu say, he is my Lord, birth after birth. So when we're singing this, at Guru Puja, do we know what these lines mean? And even if we do know, do we believe or understanding the depth of what we're singing? He is my Lord. Prabhupada instituted this in front of the deities in all of the centers for all time in ISKCON. It's a very powerful statement. So when Srila Prabhupada introduced daily Guru Puja to himself into his temples after the deity greeting, he was making a powerful statement whose significance we're only now starting to realize. Question: how can we keep Srila Prabhupada from becoming a mere figurehead who fades into oblivion as time marches on? The answer, again, by always living in the love and light of his instructions. And as we've said, you see how it works when you go to a place like Udupi, the headquarters of the Madhva line, or Sri Rangam, the headquarters of the Ramanuja line. If you ask anybody who they are, they will tell you something in connection with their Founder-Acarya, and they will praise their Diksha and Shiksha gurus for enriching that foundational core identity with their Founder-Acarya. So that's a sentimental fiction. As time goes on, times have changed, and Prabhupada was for another time. No, if we want to continually represent Prabhupada freshly and dynamically, we have to be in touch with his teachings, and we have to understand that he provides our foundational identity and relationship, which actually gives life to all our other relationships, initiating, instructing, parents, friends, you name it, in this context. Prabhupada is the absolutely transparent, be a medium of exchange in those relationships. Okay, next fiction, sentimental fiction. Gone Forever, Prabhupada. There's Prabhupada enjoying a light moment with devotees. I believe it's in Germany on a morning walk in the mid-1970s. I'm going to scroll in now a statement that Prabhupada wrote right after he finished Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, right in his quarters in the Honolulu Temple in 1974. It's a rather, it might sound drastic to you. It's in the words he wrote. It's called Concluding Words. Okay. There are two ways of association, by Vani and by Vapu. Vani means words, and Vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not. But Vani continues to exist eternally. Therefore, we must take advantage of the Vani, not the physical presence. So that's that last phrase, not the physical presence. If you just take that as the only word Prabhupada ever said about Vani and Vapu, you could even take it so far as to, when the spiritual master is in the room, you might ignore him, or you might, just neglect him. Well, Vani is more important than Vapu, Guru Maharaj. I'll see you around. No, this is a good example of how we have to take Prabhupada whole. So here's a balancing quote that Prabhupada gave in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, Chapter 1, Text 35, purport excerpt. Prabhupada writes, quote, "The service of the spiritual master is essential. If there is no chance to serve the spiritual master directly," and he means physically, "a devotee should serve him by remembering his instructions. There is no difference between the spiritual master's instructions and the spiritual master himself. In his absence, therefore," I mean, of course, physical absence, "therefore, his words of direction should be the pride of the disciple." Yeah, that story of Prabhupada in his last days. He's trying to do another world tour with practically no body left. He's at Bhaktivedanta Manor in September 1977. He can't even speak. He's too weak to speak. So he has Tamal Krishna Maharaj speak. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who's acting as his personal secretary, proceeds to recap highlights of Prabhupada's preaching Leela from 1966 to 1977. And at one point in TKG's summary, he says that Prabhupada himself, he only was with his spiritual master maybe 5 or 6 times. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj used to say that as soon as he said that, he noticed a smile creep over Prabhupada's face. And then Prabhupada even interrupted him. And he said, actually, there was never a moment when I didn't feel that my Guru Maharaj was right by my side. Yeah. So there's a hint of what Prabhupada means in that purport excerpt when he says, in his absence, therefore, his words, the spiritual master's words of direction, should be the pride of the disciple. That's a good pride. And you can be proud of your spiritual master and be determined to be his good son or daughter and nicely represent him and follow him back to Godhead, out of this world and back home, back to Godhead. So although the spiritual master's form and initiations, his physical presence and his initiation ceremonies are also divine because, for example, our Prabhupada used his body, mind, and words in Krishna's service. Therefore, they were not material per Shastra. And although the initiations he conducted, they were certainly divine rites of passage. It is Prabhupada's instructions that really sustain us over time. As Prabhupada himself noted on the dedication page of his Srimad Bhagavatam, quote, he lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. Now, although the Founder-Acarya provides his followers, all of his followers, core identity, some people still insist on crowning Prabhupada as everyone's perpetual Diksha Guru. Now we will hear why. Okay? So there's the last sentimental misconception. I call it Diksha Guru forever Prabhupada. Here are some references to dispel that misconception from Prabhupada himself. Quote, keep trained up very rigidly, and then you are bona fide guru. And you can accept disciples on the same principle. But as a matter of etiquette, it is the custom that during the lifetime of your spiritual master, you bring the prospective disciples to him. And in his absence or disappearance, you can accept disciples without any limitation. This is the law of disciplic succession. Notice that word law. Prabhupada was forever adjusting details, but he was never tampering with principles, or you could say laws. This is the law of disciplic succession. I want to see my disciples become bona fide spiritual master and spread Krishna consciousness very widely. That will make me and Krishna very happy. Of course, he didn't want us to imitate him, which did happen, but he did want us to be regular gurus in our own right. Here's another corroborative reference. This is 1969. This is very early on. It's extraordinary, too, because the context of this letter is that Prabhupada had just introduced the concept of Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. He's saying that now that we have a few books, and really he only has 2 books in 1969, at the date of this letter, January. He only has Teachings of Lord Chaitanya and a rather butchered edition of the Bhagavad Gita by Macmillan, who left out half the purport. But still, Prabhupada, in his vision, he's enthusiastic to share with the devotees gems like this. And here's what he says in a letter to Hansaduta, 3rd January 69. Quote, I want that all of my spiritual sons and daughters will inherit this title of Bhakti Vedanta, so that the family transcendental diploma will continue through the generations. Those possessing the title of Bhaktivedanta will be allowed to initiate disciples. And here's the most extraordinary line. Maybe by 1975, he was writing in 69, he's saying, maybe by 1975, all of my disciples will be allowed to initiate and increase the numbers of the generation. Now, he didn't say he'd be gone either, because sometimes, although it's the usual etiquette that you wait till your spiritual master leaves before you assume that service of initiating, especially initiating, sometimes there's an emergency, as there, for example, there is today in Russia. So people who have taken initiation from the spiritual master, they're being asked, at least in one case I know, to start initiating themselves, because there's such an emergency need for senior devotees to take up that role in Russia, which is exploding with Krishna consciousness more than America ever was in the 60s and the 70s. So Prabhupada, this is his vision. He wants everybody to grow up and not only take shelter, but give shelter. Shiksha, Diksha Guru will be allowed to initiate disciples. Here's another reference from 1973 on his Vyasa Puja Day at the manor. The day after he's installed Srila Gokulananda at the manor, it was that year that they got the manor by George Harris. Great. Krishna, of course, working through Dr. George. So here is an excerpt from Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja address. They're all honoring Prabhupada on his Vyasa Puja Day. Prabhupada tosses the ball right back.
Can I interrupt just
yes.
for a moment? The last several minutes, your voice degraded a bit. I don't think it's the internet. It might. Did you move your mic at all?
No. Oh, you're right. It fell. So I will replace it. And do you remember where we were?
No, it's just been a little bit, not too long.
Okay. So it just fell out. I just noticed. I'll have to keep looking down. Okay, we're talking about Diksha Guru Forever, and we're in the middle of references to corroborate what Prabhupada's saying on the letter here to Tushta Krishna 2 December 75, that the law of disciple succession is that who is the student today is the teacher tomorrow. And there it goes again, falling out. Let me place it. Okay. All right. Okay, that's a little snugger. Okay, thank you, Ramananda. And now we're offering corroborative references from Srila Prabhupada to show how he really wants us to all grow up and take responsibility for others as regular gurus, not imitate with Founder-Acarya. So here is Srila Prabhupada on his Vyasa Puja Day, and he's saying, quote, I hope that all of you, men, women, boys, and girls, become spiritual master and follow this principle. Spiritual master, simply, sincerely follow the principles and speak to the general public. Then you become Krishna's favorite. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, quote, one who is doing this humble service of preaching work, Krishna consciousness, nobody is dearer to me. So if you want to become recognized by Krishna very quickly, you take up this process of becoming spiritual master. Present the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Then your life will be perfect. Thank you very much. Brilliant of Prabhupada to say that on his own Vyasa Puja Day. Again, Prabhupada was more concerned that after he would leave, and he never knew when he was going to leave, he always said that, he wasn't as concerned with people imitating him, although that did happen. He was more concerned that in our supreme esteem for him as Founder-Acarya, and even among Founder-Acaryas, he did what no one ever did. by the grace of the previous acharyas and Lord Chaitanya, he was really worried that we wouldn't carry on the line and take it to every town and village in the proper way, cooperating to study his books, distribute his books, build spiritual communities, worship his form, his murti, like that. Okay. And finally, so we had a letter reference, we had the spoken reference from his Vyasa-Puja address. Here's a snippet from a Bhagavatam purport 2943. Prabhupada simply says, quote, "One who is now the disciple is the next spiritual master, and one cannot be a bona fide and authorized spiritual master unless one has been strictly obedient to his spiritual master." So following Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, Srila Prabhupada's clear instruction is that all of his followers become Guru, both Shiksha and Diksha. And yet, what can make us vulnerable to the fiction you still see on your screen there, which is Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada, what can make us vulnerable to this sentimental misconception is something I call fads. Fads, the Founder-Acarya disease. Carried by a guru, or a so-called guru, who is grossly or subtly imitating the Founder-Acarya, Founder-Acarya disease, or fads, blocks our foundational relationship with him, tempting us, if we're not philosophically grounded, to illegally anoint the Founder-Acarya as everyone's perpetual Diksha Guru. So there's the slide. I just pulled that image off Google Images. It's pretty good because it looks like he didn't want people to know what he's doing. And at the same time, perhaps pretending to be something he's not. Anyway, that's the best I could do for now. We'll see what comes up. And the bullet points, Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada is an allergic reaction to fads. Founder-Acarya disease. Next point, although fads has been in remission in ISKCON since the 1980s, wherever it flares up or has not been completely rooted out, Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada will surely follow. It's a Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada. It's a monster we create. Like I call the imitation founder, the fads carrier. I compare him to Dr. Frankenstein. And then Frankenstein's monster, the monster he creates, is his Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada. And then I ask the audience when I'm live, what could be some symptoms of fads? And then they offer, what they think or what they maybe have witnessed. And then I ask, why would we want Srila Prabhupada as our Diksha Guru when we already have him as our Founder-Acarya? And so they think about that, and then they say, well, it's because that's what we've done in ISKCON. We've put the focus very often exclusively on the Diksha Guru. And that's out of balance. That's not Guru Sadhu Shastra, it's not Vaishnava history, and it creates fragmentation. Okay. So that's the last slide of the seminar. Lesson summary, or lesson objectives. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to identify and dispel impersonal fictions about Srila Prabhupada, identify and dispel sentimental fictions about Srila Prabhupada, and moreover, students will be able to identify fads, the Founder-Acarya disease, and its symptoms. So a preview of the last lesson. Unencumbered by impersonal and sentimental notions about our Founder-Acarya, Srila Prabhupada, we are now free to cultivate our own unique, authentic relationship with him as his eternal, loving servant. Now, as we speak, Ramananda Prabhu, I still haven't gotten word from the Orlando devotees. I'll be presenting a few lessons, the Sambandha lessons from the seminar down in Orlando next weekend, Friday the 8th, Saturday the 9th, Sunday the 10th. And I still haven't seen, I'll tell you what, just for fun, I'm going to get out of this and just check the email to see if maybe it has answered. All right? So we're going to, you see it first. And let's see if it came back. No, he's not there. Okay. All right. I can't tell you as we speak, Prabhus, if I'll be able to, if the broadband is good enough, or if the internet setup is good enough to give the last lesson next Saturday at same time, same place, same time. I'll have to let Ramananda know because my contact down there, he didn't tell me that. So, okay, Ramananda. So what we'll do now is unmute and questions and comments. Again, try to limit your questions and comments to the points of the lesson.
Okay, I've unmuted everyone. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Suresh Prabhu.
Vidagamadavaji.
Dhanyavad.
So,
I appreciate what you're doing, and that's why I'm listening in. And you might want to work a little bit on the fads section, just the end. I love the image. I really like the image. I think you should keep that image because...
Okay, there it is.
Yeah. But, the Ritvik issue is a serious issue. And, it's not all... these people aren't all black, and the people that are against them aren't all white. It was an unfortunate development because some of these people are angry. Some of them are crazy. Some of them are angry because they don't feel, everyone's following Prabhupada. And so they went off on this thing. This is, the shelter. We're going to take Prabhupada, the shelter of Srila Prabhupada, until, at least until things get to a point where we feel, that they're serious about following Prabhupada or whatever.
Right.
And so, one thing, I would drop the fads. It's kind of demeaning, in a way. It's just the impression I got. You might approach it differently. You might rewrite it, differently because, they do have their points. Some of these people, not all of them. I'm not a Ritvik. I don't believe in that. It's flawed. But these people, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. There's a reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
anyway, it's just something to think about, just to kind of rethink that part of it. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I put fads in there, because fads is I'm hitting on not the Ritviks, but who am I criticizing
there? I don't know. Maybe it escapes me. Maybe you should give me the.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't just bash Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada. It's half right. People know there's something wrong. So why did that come up? Why did that sentimental fiction emerge? Because there is gross or subtle imitation of the Founder-Acarya. FAD stands for Founder-Acarya Dis-ease. And so wherever you have people accepting a level of worship that's really imitative of the Founder-Acarya and strutting and prancing, then and grossly or subtly blocking people's foundational core relationship with the Founder-Acharya. That's fads, and fad is the allergic reaction to fads is Diksha Guru Forever Prabhupada. In other words, it's a very understandable reaction to fads. So I didn't just bash Ritvik. I went to the root of it. The root of it is the imitation of the Founder-Acharya. Maybe I didn't make that clear in the lesson.
Okay. I get it now. So we're into here. We're getting into his Guru Tattva, and certainly the disciple, as you mentioned in the earlier section, Prabhupada defines someone who's qualified to take up the work of an Acharya or a Guru, or let's just say Guru, forget Acharya, but he has to be strictly obedient to the spiritual master.
Right.
And beyond that, he should be transparent to the spiritual master. So then the issue is when he becomes opaque, when he lets, when he becomes that he's got his own idea now.
The exclusive focus.
Yeah.
When it's all about him, right?
Right. But there, on the other side, if someone's taking responsibility for new disciples,
right,
they should be allowed certain, some latitude. They're dealing, they're the ones that are taking responsibility. So they may make some adjustments. Prabhupada made so many adjustments.
Adjusting details, never tampering with principles.
Right. But then that has to be, that's a
whole discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a discussion.
Well, Vedanta Madhav, have you been here for all the lessons? Because I take pains to say whoever's enriching, and this includes those of us who are initiated by Prabhupada, whoever's enriching our foundational relationship with Prabhupada is glorious. They are gurus. Yeah,
and that's, it's an easy, being shiksha, giving shiksha, as sincerely as you can, is also being guru.
Equal and identical manifestations, as we heard in the first lesson of the Supreme Lord.
Are you aware of this one letter, Madhukanta? I can send you this by email, but it's a very, very powerful letter. And I was wondering if this you might find some points in that letter to work into this presentation. Is a letter to Purandar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a letter to a disciple where, you can pull some quotes from. It's specifically about how Prabhupada wanted things to go on after he left.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought this up with Kalakanta Prabhu, and it went to a place where, and I'm totally understand. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Kalakanta Prabhu, but we know there was a little history there where we all know that small mistakes can snowball into big ones, right? Mm-hmm. So if there's a Prabhupada, probably you could find quotes where he says, just a little deviation, can be a disaster, in the end. Right. So we had, and you mentioned, interestingly enough, the zonal Acharya system was the seed of that. Prabhupada gave that to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And then, they did something they probably shouldn't have done with it. Oddly enough, the Ritviks, they are livid that Srila Krishna Maharaj is the author of the zonal Acharya system. That's, part of their offensive stance.
Yeah, well,
but
the GBC, anyway, how they did it. Prabhupada gave us the zonal Acharya system, but they gave us the zonal Acharya era, the GBC, and we never want to repeat that.
Right. So the second tier management, we know the history. They objected to that and other things, and there was a change of the guard. There was the management changed some people moved up from the second level, temple presidents and whatnot. But and I'm not blaming anyone, but you could say in one sense they inherited a system. And what was done at the beginning, I think the zonal Acharya thing is almost a straw man for me. It's just it's side dressing to the core issue, which is a central bureaucracy, a top-heavy bureaucracy, which has made ISKCON, the flavor of ISKCON has become not just an institution, a spiritual movement evolves into an institution. I can follow that, but it's almost corporate. It's got, it's too, and because a small group, and it's impractical also for a small group to try to micromanage so much. Of course they're going to run into problems. It's too much.
But Dr. Prabhu, if you email me that letter to Karundar, I will email you. Have you read the Founder-Acarya dissertation by our GBC committee?
No.
You should really read this, because it's all about harmonizing, gurus and GBCs and everybody based on gurus out of a Shastra. I mean, what you're expressing has been, we know for decades, but it is changing, at least at the level of thinking. Maybe not on the level of feeling and willing. It's always too slow, but it's not really the way it was, 30 years ago. Everybody, at least at the level of thinking, they get it, and they know that Prabhupada and Bhakti Vinod and Bhakti Siddhanta and our Prabhupada knew that for us to take Krishna consciousness to every town and village, there's going to have to be qualified, and there's the key word, GBCs and qualified gurus, not working hand in fist, but working hand in hand. Those lines of authority, they really do complement each other when it's done right. And it's almost inevitable that what happened historically did happen, but it's starting to improve. And I wish you would email me that letter, and I will be happy to send you this PDF. It's quite a landmark document. It's good.
No problem. Anyway, I like what you're doing. I think it's helping. It's in the right direction.
Yeah, Prabhupada, he's got me all over the place doing this. Thank you, Dr. Prabhu. We better see if anybody else has got something. Yeah, I'll look for you in my inbox.
Okay.
Hari. Anybody else, Ramananda?
I have anything in the chat? Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Suresh G. Go ahead. I'm not that important. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Suresvara Prabhu. Very, very interesting class. Of course, we could, if we really, really start talking about this class, we would be here for the next 3 months talking about it non-stop, because there's so much that can be discussed. Yeah. But maybe we can take it one at a time. Your point about the brahmachari who was eating pizza during Guru Puja, Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja. I think the issue here, the main issue is that this brahmachari actually was not connected to Srila Prabhupada. I mean, if you were really connected to Srila Prabhupada and you were in a temple and Guru Puja was going on, it's not that the problem was not really the taking of the prashadam, but the fact that it was taking, I think, eating pizza during Ekadasi or something like that. I don't know. But I think that he was not really connected to Prabhupada, and I think that everyone has the right not to be connected if they are not connected. So I think the job of the devotees is to connect the dots and connect people with Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara system. And if people are not connected, then there is something wrong there, and then we have to strive for connecting people without forcing it. You cannot force. Okay, you know, Prabhu, you cannot hit people over the head with the books or something. You have to actually find a way that you can bring Prabhupada into their hearts, and that's not an easy job. It's not really easy, but without that connection, you don't have anything, really. I mean, the people are not really connected to Prabhupada. So you have to be very patient, and it cannot rubber stamp things. And I think maybe that's the problem with the zonal Acharya system, and I'm a byproduct of that zonal Acharya. In a sense, I could criticize it forever, but on the other hand, I can say, hey, well, without the zonal Acharya system, I wouldn't be here either. So, you know, it had good things and it had bad things, but ultimately, we need to connect with Prabhupada in the heart, inside your heart. Without that, you know, we are not. And in fact, you can even connect with Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj in your heart, or you can connect with other gurus in your heart. But if you are not connected to them, you are not, you know.
Okay, yeah, definitely. When I told that incident of the, you know, the person eating on Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja Day, I forget exactly how I put it, but I tried to make it clear that it was obvious that no one had told that brahmachari, that the Founder-Acarya is everybody's foundational spiritual master. Now the irony is that probably the greatest evidence for the position of the Founder-Acarya that I found in this seminar is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's verses from the Harinama Chintamani. Now I use a translation of those verses from Jayapataka Maharaj, who wrote this Vyasa Puja offering using those verses way back in 1989. Now, he knows very well, Jayapataka Maharaj knows very well Srila Prabhupada's position. The pity is that he hasn't, for whatever reason, systematically educated his disciples about Prabhupada's position. It's starting to change a little bit now that this Founder-Acharya issue is becoming to the forefront. That's one of the many historical ironies of ISKCON, is that Jayapataka Maharaj, as much as anyone, has known Prabhupada's position, but he just doesn't educate his disciples. And you're right, it is the responsibility of the spiritual master to do that. It's really not the disciples' fault. And therefore, I say we don't need more legislation. We don't need more resolutions about the Founder-Acharya. We need more education. And that's what we're trying to do now. You know, the ship is turning. You know, we're trying to really focus on education. And the leadership is ready for it. They're open to it. They're applauding it, even as they're not necessarily educating their own disciples that way, but they're not resisting it. We're still very much in recovery from the Founder-Acharya, from the zonal Acharya, not the system, but the era. You know, the way that system that Prabhupada gave us was applied imitatively of his position. So you couldn't be more right. It can't be, get with it, guy. You know, you're a Prabhupada Nuga. No, you have to bring him along, and it takes time. These things develop over time. Love can never be forced, but it starts with thinking, and thinking has to be educated. Then it goes to feeling. Then it goes to behavior. So, thank you very much. All right, Ramananda, it's 20 minutes after the hour here, so should we wrap it up?
Narahari had something to say.
Oh, Narahari. I hear his parrot. Jai, oh, best of the parrot masters. I hear your parrots in the background.
Well, I chant like a parrot, Prabhuji. They just chant without any feeling. It's like sort of like a mechanical sound. You know?
You chant like a shuka. Come on, you make it sweeter. I know you.
Anyway, I was thinking sort of an off-base thought when Vidagda made the comment, and I liked it, and I agreed with him that that the spiritual master needs to have a little attitude. And you immediately responded, and I also liked your response, was that you immediately brought up the idea of principle and detail, that he may adjust the details, but never the principles.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, though, that of course the principle is chanting Hare Krishna. I mean, that's the Yuga Dharma, and that can never be changed. But yet we saw Prabhupada adjusted that that principle for us. He saw that chanting 64 rounds, which was the standard that he was given, was perhaps inappropriate or impractical for those of us in the Western world. And then Prabhupada, of course, said in his books that chanting 16 rounds, that is our standard for ISKCON, and in the Anchalila, where Haridas Thakur was unable to chant his rounds because he had become old and infirm, and Lord Chaitanya said, you, Haridas, you're a pure devotee now, you don't need to chant. And Prabhupada commented in the purport that anyone who is not chanting 16 rounds is considered to be in a diseased state of spiritual life. But I was thinking that, well, what in a case of a spiritual master had a disciple that was perhaps mentally challenged, and in that particular case, and they were very sincere, but realistically unable to chant 16 rounds, it would seem reasonable that the spiritual master may, in a special case, say, okay, well, if, truly knowing the psycho and physical constitution of the disciple, all right, you simply chant 8 rounds a day, and that will be sufficient, and I will be pleased. So it would seem that perhaps there could be little adjustments made as needed, even in that regard. What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, the principle is chant Hare Krishna.
Right, that we all agree on. That can't
and the number Prabhupada did adjust down at 26 from 64 to 32 to 16.
And he locked it at that. We put a lock on it.
Yeah, he did. Now, even having said that, I can think of a couple of cases in Prabhupada's Leela, preaching Leela, where he did make exceptions, because just as you're suggesting. But they were so rare. They were so rare. One was a very nice devotee, Indian devotee in Vrindavan named Vibhu Chaitanya, who joined when he was older, and he, right from the get-go, he became the cook for Krishna Balaram and Radha Shamsundar and Gaur Nitai. And he literally, for 20, 30 years, he was in that kitchen. I mean, this is no joke. He was actually in the kitchen all day, cooking all the offerings for all the deities for decades. And while he was in there cooking, he was singing. He was singing bhajans, and he was singing Hare Krishna. So once, while Prabhupada was within earshot of Vibhu Chaitanya's cooking and singing, he asked Harishari Prabhu. I know this because I just heard Harishari report this on one of his seminars that he gives based on his diary. Prabhupada said, "Who is that?" "Oh, that's Vibhu Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada. He cooks all the offerings all day for the deities, but devotees are concerned that he doesn't chant his rounds. He never chants his rounds because he's just from morning till night, singing." So in this particular case, Prabhupada did make an exception. He said, "Well, that's all right. He's chanting all day. Because while he was cooking all day, he was chanting all day, chanting and singing." Now, this was a very, very advanced soul. I think he was even in Brijbasi. Prabhupada made an exception for him. Very early in the 60s, Gargamuni told Srila Prabhupada, Gargamuni, Prabhupada would joke, because he was the treasurer of the San Francisco temple. He always had this, talent for dealing with money. So Gargamuni was reporting in a letter that he couldn't chant his rounds. So Prabhupada said, "You must, at least for 1 hour every day, go before the deities in the temple and just very sincerely just chant on your beat." So the highest principle, what to speak of principles in detail, there's higher and lower principles, as you're sort of suggesting in your question. So the highest principle from Rupa Goswami and Lord Chaitanya is somehow or other get people to fix their minds on Krishna. All the rules and regulations should be maidservants of this principle. So is if you hear Prabhupada both in his spoken word and his written word, he does hammer 16 rounds again and again and again. That is the standard. So if someone is actually in the role of a Shiksha and Diksha Guru, what makes the adjustment acceptable is when it gets people aboard, or it keeps people interested in Krishna consciousness and keeps them moving up. It keeps them moving forward. To extend the mercy, so to speak, at the bottom does not compromise the principles at the top when everybody, or when that adjustment is keeping people aboard and moving closer to Krishna. So those kind of adjustments, they can be done, but they're never done unilaterally. If say, if I were going to make an adjustment like that, or you for somebody, it would have to really be in consultation, as you're doing right now, with trusted senior devotees who understand Prabhupada's mood, who understand his mission, his life, and his teachings. So the exceptions are rare, and they always serve the principle. They don't compromise the principle. That's
a great answer. I like that. Do it if you have to do it, but to make sure, don't do it unilaterally. Consult with some seniors that you trust and have faith in. And great answer.
Well, that's like Prabhupada. That's it, Prabhupada. He even consulted, showing us how to consult. He didn't really need to consult us. What do you think?
Sometimes the simplest, most obvious things we miss. We have to keep hearing it, which is why we're hearing every day. And though, like what you said, it's an obvious thing, but especially when you're taking such an elevated role of initiating. We could see the danger and the tendency to go unilateral. And we really have to be careful. Mm-hmm. No, I like your answer. Yeah. And I like Vidagda's point that he brought up. It got me thinking even more.
Yeah, we're really churning it here. Thank you, everybody. All right, almost half past the hour here. What should we do, Ramananda?
Well, let's go all day.
Well, I've got a question for you. This is Balabhadradas here.
Balabhadra.
Sorry, Prabhupada. Thank you for the seminar. I tried to listen to it entirely. A phone call here and a phone call there took me away, but other than that, in talking about making adjustments, it would seem to me that the very idea of making adjustments lends itself very easily to the situation that Krishna describes in the fourth chapter of Rita, as Sakala Neha Mahata Yugamashta. Don't you, it would seem to me like you would need to, make some emphasis in that area if we're going to talk about making adjustments. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Right. Principles you don't mess with. Principles you don't tamper with. Adjustments are applications of principles to help a person or persons come closer to the principle. As Prabhupada himself says in his purport to Gita 331, I think the verse is, one who executes his duty according to my injunctions and who follows this teaching faithfully without envy is free from the bondage of fruitive actions. That's the gist. In the purport, Prabhupada says that in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the spiritual master, but because one is not resentful of this principle. That's the bottom line. If somebody is not resentful, if the spiritual master can detect that sincerity, then he won't make adjustments unless he sees that the adjustment is going to bring that person up. Making adjustments doesn't mean to water things down. It doesn't mean sakale neha mahata. That's material. That's where things go from a point of integrity to a point of dispersion, as they say in science. So the spiritual energy is just the opposite. Everything gets better and better and better, ever increasing. Here it's ever diminishing. It's ever dispersing. So I think what I said to Narahari still holds. Before anybody who's in that position of a guardian, whether it's a parent or a spiritual master or a worshipable demigod, as Lord Rishabdev said. You don't make those adjustments unless they're conducive to delivering your dependents from birth and death. It's to be made very carefully. So again, adjusting in detail, which means an application of a principle, you can do. But the principles you don't tamper with. The principle is Jan Hare Krishna. That's one of the 5 of the essential principles Rupa Goswami mentions that we have to do. Is that all right?
Yes, it is. But in line of that, like it's just like then I look back at what Vidya Dhamadava's comment about what if a spiritual master sees an aspiring disciple who's, let's say, mentally challenged and really can't chant Hare Krishna like everyone else, and he has to like make an adjustment. Say, okay, well, you don't have to chant 16 like everybody else. Just chant 1 or 2 a day or whatever like that. Is that realistic? I mean,
no, Prabhu. Narahari was the one who brought up mentally challenged, and the way I took his question was after the fact. In other words, if someone's not even fit to follow principles, then they can certainly make progress. But to take that diksha step, they might have to wait. So when Nara mentioned his mentally challenged, made his mentally challenged comment, I took it that somebody is a devotee, and then they all of a sudden they have a hard time. They go into a funk, a real funk, where they do become mentally challenged, but they've already taken vows, right? It's kind of after the fact. And so the spiritual master is willing to work with them to help them out of the funk, to bring them to the principle. And that's not watering things down. That's not compromising things. That's helping someone to come to the principle. All the rules and regulations should be made servants of this principle. Always remember Krishna, never forget him. That's the highest principle. But again, the guru would do well to consult before he makes those kinds of adjustments. And he's not going to dismiss the rule, in the name of an exception. It's definitely an exception, but it's an exception to serve the rule, not to minimize the rule. That's a crucial distinction.
Because we do get these instructions from like for example the last verse of the Ishopanishad where the prayer says, please free me from the reactions to my past sins so that there will be no more hindrance to my progress. And that verse is there because sometimes our past sins, they really do, not sometimes, they do. They hinder us from our progress in devotional service. And so, we have to make some kind of distinction if we're going to act as Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, or whatever, to identify our own behavior. Is our appropriate behavior, we're going to make some kind of exception here and exception there. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like there's a fine line there somewhere. Sometimes it can be pretty cloudy. Am I making an exception or am I compromising?
That's right. That's why we have to understand everything in the association of like-minded devotees. Remember what like-minded devotees means? By Rupa Goswami, it means associating with devotees who are pure, more elevated, and realized. That's no small thing. That means like-minded, serious and sincere to surrender to Krishna. So we don't make these adjustments lightly. They're always adjustments to serve the principle. Not to water down the principle, but to serve the principle. I hope I'm trying to make it clear. That's as clear.
The reason why I'm pushing on this question is because, I really want to do something, to serve Lord Chaitanya's movement. I want to try to fulfill that commitment, try to tell someone about Krishna, and I have an opportunity once a week. I go to the prison at Snake River Conversion Institution once a week, and I give Bhagavad Gita classes, seminars to the inmates that are there, and they're very steady. There's a small number. There's only 3 that come every week, and they're very sincere. And I just want to make sure that I'm not, deviating. And so, therefore, when I'm asking these questions, it's just because I'm protecting myself. That's what I'm really doing here.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I just want to make sure. Okay, if I tell someone what I'm doing, then they're going to say, "Well, what are you doing that for? Don't you know the Guru Shastra kind of thing? Don't you know etiquette? Don't you know Vaishnava etiquette? What do you know?"
No, they don't. They don't know it. So that's why. let me just say one more thing. In the last lesson, to love us to cooperate, you remember how it ended? Lord Chaitanya took that time out with Sanatan to marvel at Sanatan Goswami, to say, you know these things, Sanatan, you're asking me all these questions,
right,
but you're just inquiring for the sake of strictness.
Mm-hmm.
And then Prabhupada said in his oral comment 2 years later in New York City, this is what a sadhu does. He doesn't think that everything he thinks, feels, and wills is automatically right. He wants it always to check it out with higher authorities.
Exactly.
So bottom line is association of serious and sincere devotees. We always make that. We don't do anything on our own.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I really enjoy everything.
I
was just going to say, sure, can you allow questions like this at the end? It really, really enhances the session.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
But all good things have to end. It is 7:40 almost.
Let me just clarify that. That's when my phone rang. I got cut there. I just want to clarify, Prabhu, just before we end. Actually, my question was really not after the fact, but before the fact. Mm-hmm. That could we adjust that number of rounds? The reason that question came to my mind, that at our Sunday programs that we have here, there's 2 boys that I'm mentoring. One is autistic, and the other has cerebral palsy. Now, mm-hmm. neither of them are at the point where I feel,
I lost them.
Yeah, I lost them.
I'm sorry, neither of them are really at the point yet where they would be ready. But the thought had crossed my mind. The boy, for example, with cerebral palsy, really sincere. Really, he's reading. He comes in a handy van to our programs. He asks wonderful questions. He's really sincere, but it's really difficult. It would probably be impossible for him to chant 16 rounds. He even motor skills, he has to use. I bought him a clicker, so he uses his clicker to chant, and he can't even use his thumb. He has to sort of press the clicker thing against his chest, and he has a very difficult time speaking. But it would seem this is just all theoretical, but if someone like that were really sincere, it would seem reasonable to adjust. Or if you can chant 8 rounds a day, say, for the rest of your life, and follow all the principles, et cetera, that would not seem like an unreasonable to me, an unreasonable adjustment. But then I liked your point, though maybe you were thinking differently, but I still like the point, is that, all right, if you're going to do such a thing, definitely do it in consultation with others, not unilaterally. But I was actually thinking before the fact, not after the fact. Does that change your answer at all?
Well, yeah. I would say, I guess I'm just going to back up and say, Krishna is not a technicality. In other words, for example, in the case of George Harrison. Now, George Harrison did so much service for Srila Prabhupada's movement. It's really hard to calculate it. But he never took initiation. For one thing, he was never able to give up nicotine. He was addicted to nicotine. But Prabhupada would refer to George sometimes as his uninitiated disciple, quote unquote. So, in a case where someone is physically, they can't even, they can hardly vibrate the mantra, perhaps, there's 3 kinds of japa. There's mana in the mind. There's softly, vachika, and then there's loudly, upangsu. I'm not. I think I'm getting those right. But there's 3 kinds. There's mental japa. There's barely audible japa, and then there's loud japa. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he recommends loud japa. And predicating our mind, he knows where we're coming from. We've got to shout down our minds sometimes. Anyway, if someone is that sincere, perhaps, with his mind, he could chant mana japa, But then I'm just thinking on my feet. Maybe I might require the person to be always looking at some visual of the Hare Krishna mantra, in front of him. just to remind him, just like we do when we chant japa, the mind wanders and then we bring it back. So there's no material impediment to go back to Godhead. There's no material qualification or disqualification. So before I adjusted the number, I would maybe try to adjust the technique. But I mean, this is just thinking out loud. Or even if the person never officially took initiation, I would just leave it to Krishna. If Krishna might just take the person home, anyway, because he was physically unable. But I would probably try to go that other route too, just to try to get him to as Prabhupada would say, numerical strength. Fix it, keep it at 16, but do it in a way that he could actually do. Anyway.
But wouldn't the principle of quality override the principle of quantity in a situation like that?
Well, it's always
or
about
that is
quality,
situation, not really.
Yeah,
In any situation, the principle
but they're not. But they're connected. Quality and quantity are connected. We immerse ourselves in japa for 16 rounds every day, and hopefully there is some quality will come out there. Prabhupada would talk about numerical strength. I talked to a god sister once, and she said, "Oh yeah, the first 8 rounds I chant, I can hardly hear the mantra, and then I start to hear better." So anyway, we can go on in details, but bottom line, we never make these adjustments unilaterally. And what do I say? Krishna's not a technicality. He can take anyone back. I would be very hesitant, reluctant myself, if I were in the role of a Diksha Guru, initiating spiritual master, to make that exception like that. But I would try to see if there was a way the person could do it mentally, but with some visual cues. Okay, Ramana, we better wrap it up.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Prabhu, very much.
Great class, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Necessary. All right. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, Haribol.
Haribol.
Thank you. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.